Hi, I'm Amira from Kenilworth Floral, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to make an asymmetrical holiday wreath. So we're going to start with a pre-made grapevine form, and you can get these from any craft supply store, from your local florist or garden center, or if you're feeling super ambitious, you can even make them yourself. I'm using a variety of different evergreen foliage. I like to use evergreen foliage because it lasts all winter. People always ask me how long their winter wreaths are going to last, and if you live in a cold climate like we do here in Canada, these will last outdoors well into March or even early April. We're going to start with this noble fir. I love noble fir because it's got such structured architectural stems and it makes a great base. It's really kind of like the spine of the wreaths. We also have this beautiful Oregonia. It's got nice variegated leaves, it's a little bit daintier, still quite strong and sturdy. Then my favorite, we've got some gold tip cedar here. I love this because whereas the fir is really strong and rigid and great as kind of the backbone of the wreath, the cedar is really flouncy and textural and gives the wreath some really beautiful movement and shape. So to bring a little color and texture into the wreath, I've found these gorgeous golden ilex berries. Normally you find these in red and they're used a lot in Christmas decor, but I'm a little bit sick of the red ones. I love this amber color. I think it looks so nice with the greens. We've also got these cotton stems, and this is real cotton. It's what it looks like before it's turned into a textile, and I love it for holiday wreaths because it looks like little snowballs. So we're going to start building the base with the noble fir. I always start with the most rigid stems, and you can cut this into a few different pieces. Obviously this is a little too big and wild to work into a wreath, so you're going to want some pretty sharp florist shears. You can get them on Amazon, you can get them from your local garden center. If you're in Canada, Lee Valley has an amazing selection of Japanese shears. I recommend going with the ones that are a little bit more expensive if you're planning on doing this on a regular basis, because the cheap ones will go dull really quickly. These ones have a really fine tip, so they're good for kind of getting into the really small wedges of the branches and getting a really sharp, close cut. So I'm going to cut this into a few different pieces, and I'm just going to lay the pieces of fir in the direction that I want them to face. I'm not worrying too much about securing them into place right now. I just want to get a kind of balance and thickness that looks good to me. So I'm just cutting these right at the break. If you're making an asymmetrical wreath, you are going to want the stems to change direction at a certain point. So as you're selecting pieces, you kind of want to be mindful of covering up the little nubbins from the ends of the last stem that's been laid down, so you don't see that kind of awkward chopped off area at the end. So I'm just kind of tucking the ends of the stems into the grapevines right now. Again, not worrying too much about how secure they are because I am going to wire them once I have everything in place. Once I'm done with my fir, I'm going to start adding in my Oregonia, or my English boxwood. And this, because it has such stiff, rigid stems, I'm actually going to cut it into a few different pieces. And again, just kind of cutting right at the breaks in the stem so that you don't see where the cut line is. And I'm just going to fill in the negative space. So in the places where the fir isn't as heavy, I'm going to come in and kind of fill it out with more boxwood. And the same way I did with the fir, I'm going to want to switch directions halfway through so you get that nice half moon shape and you don't see any awkward kind of breaks in the stem. I'm just kind of trusting my own eye, and wherever I see a space that looks awkward to me, I keep filling it in. So now I've got the boxwood, and you can see the variegated leaves provide like a nice kind of contrast. And so last but not least, I'm going to add my cedar. And remember I said before that I like this because it has such kind of flouncy textural movement. This is where I find you really start to give the wreath some character. So I'm going to cut some longer pieces of this just because I love the weird shape of the cedar, and I'm going to kind of place it on top, tucking in underneath the other foliage and cutting some smaller pieces. There's these little yellow seeds on the cedar that look kind of like Christmas lights. I love the way it looks. So this is now I think, looking quite good and quite full. And I'm just gonna tilt it up a little bit. I don't want all the foliage to fall off because it hasn't been tucked in yet, but you can see, you know, the good sides of the foliage come around on both ends. All of my nubbins are tucked in. And I am exposing a little bit of this grapevine because I think it looks cool and I like the way the branches look when they're exposed. So now I'm gonna secure all my greens in place with some paddle wire, and you can get this from any craft supply store, the dollar store, even any camping supply store. You wanna get a pretty flexible gauge so that you can wrap it around and it's not too stiff. And you're gonna start from one end here and string it through to the back, and then secure the greenery to the grapevine and just twist the wire in the back like a twist tie until it's nice and tight and secure. Now this is the fun part. You're basically just going to spiral around the whole wreath until all of the greens are in place. And as you're doing that, you kind of want to floss the wire into the wedges of the branches and the needles, just so that it's hidden. So as you're going, just kind of look at the areas where you're wiring it and kind of tuck it behind smaller branches and in amongst the larger leaves so that it's hidden. And this is really your chance when there's little awkward pieces like this sticking out and the ends of this. This is where you want to make sure they're really flat to the side of the grapevine and secured in there. This is also your chance to kind of tame some of the wilder pieces that are sticking out. If you want it to be a little bit more compact, you just wire everything down. So I'm going to go around, and I always like to keep a few pieces sticking out because I think it looks more fun and natural that way, but that's really according to your personal preference. Always making sure to conceal your wire as you go around. So just kind of weaving in and out of the individual branches. And when I get to the end, I'm going to cut a little bit of wire with these wire cutters. So when you're cutting your wire, you really want to use proper wire cutters and not your floral clippers because they dull the blade really badly. And you can just get these from any hardware store. Now, once I've got this cut, I'm going to string it back through to the back again and string it through the grapevine and then wrap it around one of your previous wire loops. And again, just twist it like a twist tie. And twist, twist, twist until it doesn't twist anymore. Once you have your greenery in place, you want to do a bit of a shake test because if it's going to be on your front door, that's a really high traffic area, it's going to be opening and closing all the time, you want to make sure it's really in there. So it's pretty good, it's pretty sturdy, so now I'm ready to start adding my embellishments. I'm going to start with the golden ilex, and we don't need to leave this long of a stem, just enough to kind of tuck it into the base. And at this point, because we've added so much greenery and we've looped that wire around so many times, you've got this nice kind of grid to start shoving things into. And this is where it gets a lot easier to build the wreath because there's so many mechanics already in place. When I'm adding my berries, I like to crisscross them so they're not all facing the same direction. I'm just going to keep adding these in here. And as one faces out, the next one should face in. I just find it looks a lot more balanced that way. And then just like before, you want to switch directions so that you don't have this ending of awkward stem nubs. And you will lose a few berries as you go, but no worries. Once it's outside, they will freeze onto the stem and stay there. So I've got my berries in place. And next, I'm going to add my cotton. So you can really make one stem of cotton go a long way. I find these are too long and rigid to use one full stem per wreath. So I'll usually cut these into 2 or 3 pieces, and when you cut it, just make sure you cut it right behind one of the cotton balls so that you can kind of conceal that cut as you're laying things down. And I'm just gonna kind of place the cotton in the negative space where the berries aren't occupying. And same thing, I'm just tucking it into the foliage and tucking it under the wire to keep it in place. And switching directions halfway through. And you can see I'm doing this whole thing without glue. I don't like using glue because I find, especially when you live in a climate where the temperatures rise and drop quite drastically, the glue starts to kind of lose its potency, and then you start having stuff plopping off mid-season. Whereas when you have everything wired in, you know it's in there to stay. Okay, so now I've got my cotton in, and I think it's important as you're making it, because this wreath isn't going to live flat on a table, it's going to be hung on a door or on a wall. It's important to kind of hold it up against the wall or against a flat surface so you can really see how it's going to look in action. And I'm liking the way this is looking. So my last step is to add the little bits. I'm just going to kind of lay these pine cones, again, not worrying too much about securing them right off the bat. I just want to kind of place them in areas where I think they look good. The pine cones are great for kind of covering up awkward stem ends. They really cover all of your sins. And I like them in groups because when you see them growing on trees, they're kind of in clusters. They're not dotted individually throughout the tree. They're in little clusters on the ends of the branches. And so I like to mimic nature as I'm placing them. So I'm going to come around with my paddle wire the second time. And as I'm wiring all of these bits into place, I want to make sure that I really get the wire kind of in the crotches of the branches, for lack of a better word, just so that they secure everything into place and have something to latch onto. And as I'm going around, really making sure that the wire is quite tight and it's tucked behind the berries and behind the cotton balls so that it's not super obvious. Now, I love wiring pine cones into place because the little petals on the cones are super forgiving and you can really hide the wire right into the base and really secure them into place. And so you just keep wrapping around and being really delicate but also really firm with the placement of the wire. And tucking it behind the cotton so that it's secured into place. Wiring pine cones is weirdly satisfying. It's like flossing your teeth or something. Okie doke. So again, once I get to the end, I'm gonna leave a little bit of give at the end of the wire, use my wire cutters and snip the end, and then just loop this back through some of the previous loops. Pull it really tight, because if there's too much give, then the stuff is going to start falling out. And then it's kind of like a champagne cork. You just twist, 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 twist. And so here I'm looking at it, and I think, you know, it can still use a little bit more texture here, maybe a bit more line here. So I'm going to come back in with this cedar foliage that I love so much, and I just add a few extra lines, a little bit more whimsy. And at this point, because there's so much material in here, you don't even need to wire anything else into place. You can just really shove it in. This is also the time to kind of look out for any bits of wire that are exposed. And again, the cedar makes a great kind of cover-up material because it's so textural. You can just kind of wedge it into these areas and it just covers the wire right up and just fills in really nicely. So last but not least, I'm gonna add a little bit of sparkle with some Christmas balls. Again, you can just get these from any craft store or from your local home supply store. And I'm just gonna use little cuts of wire and string them through the ornaments and just add them right into the foliage here. And voila! That's how you make an asymmetrical holiday wreath. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe.